we'll go ahead and get cracking into our webinar today. So we're going to be talking about breaking down the PSA or purchase and sale agreement for apartment syndication. So what is we're going to be going through what is a property condition assessment, real property due diligence, phase 1, title and survey. Should you walk every unit and check every lease? What does retraining a deal mean, and should you do it? So that's a little bit of things that go in behind the PSA. So the outline there is a little bit disjointed from the actual discussion, but we'll get into that as well. Before I get started, Hannah, we have some questions on the webinar about block hotel reservations. So if you want to put whoever contact information these need to reach out to about lodging, that would be helpful in the chat. So we'll go ahead and get started. So purchase and sale agreement, your PSA as it is known, is built on a framework, and the framework is the LOI, the letter of intent. I'm going to go ahead and try to get this up. I'm going to hide my chat and everything for right now, and then I'm going to share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see my LOI. I know we've gone through this if you've been on some of the webinars before, but this is the framework or the outline that affects the purchase and sale agreement. So this is the small version, the summary of what the PSA will entail. So it's important to have this pretty cleaned up. And this is a template that we use. Obviously, we have our name. So this is a sterilized form that I have for webinars. But basically, I have all the pre-fill items, you know, what brokerage firm, property name, city, state, and everything. So this is all pre-done. You can do this in Word. This is very basic. You can add, it's a developer tab, or a design tab and developer tab that you can get to show up right here. And it's not, mine is not showing up right now because it just upgraded. But you can put all these little templates and drop downs and pre-fills in very easily. And so it just saves you some time, and you don't have to, you can change the main variables and not worry about, you know, missing something or leaving in the wrong state, which happens a lot of time. I just had a PSA this morning I was working on and had information from another deal that got left in, and then it kind of messed it up. So having these pre-fills is very helpful. But the first thing I'm going to point to, these are the main topics that are going to be of the LOI and of the PSA. So most of these are going to be agreed upon before you get into the purchase and sale agreement negotiations. And that's going to be purchase price, obviously, is going to be the largest one. So you're going to, you know, already have determined what your purchase price is going to be and how it's going to be paid. So whatever terms you have, if you're doing a smaller deal and there's a seller carryback note or some rollover equity or whatever the case may be, that would all be spelled out all right here. In this case, it's very simple. So purchase price and then earnest money deposit. So, and I'll get into how I have this set up and why that's going to be important to the PSA in just a minute. But the earnest money deposit, so you have this amount here, and you say it's spelled out, and then it's numeric, and then payable into escrow with third-party escrow agent after agreement is signed, of which, and I'm looking right here, of which 00 will be non-refundable contingent upon updated title survey and recent positive phase 1 environmental test results and seller default. Okay, so I'm going to break that down just a little bit. What I'm saying right here is I'm going to put a dollar figure down. 2% is industry standard of the purchase price for an earnest money deposit. So that's pretty much across the board with any asset class, 2%. In multifamily, it's split up 1% before DD or at purchase and sale agreement signature or execution, and then 50% after. So 1% at signing and 1%. When I say 1% of purchase price EMD at signing and 1% after DD is done. With some other asset classes like storage and hotel, it's sometimes one earnest money deposit with a portion of it being non-refundable, but the rest of it goes hard after DD. So instead of doing 2, it's just 1, same idea, but basic principle there. And then I can determine in this how much is going to be non-refundable. So if I said, let's say $1 million payable in escrow with third-party escrow agent, blah, 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 of which 500,000 will be non-refundable. I can spell that out right there. So I can change that there. And what I'm saying here, non-refundable contingent upon updated title, survey, and most recent positive phase 1 environmental test results and seller default. So I'm saying this money is non-refundable with 4 contingencies. It's title, so there's no issue with ownership. Survey, there's no issue with the boundaries, and there's no issue with the actual ground with phase 1. So that's your environmental. So I'm saying there's no issues with any of those, because it doesn't matter what's going on with the property. If something like is going on there and it cannot be remedied or cured, then we're going to have a problem. We won't be able to close the deal. So that money will need to be refunded to me. But what I'm saying when I'm saying non-refundable earnest money is I'm saying that even if I get into the property and I find out that the roof needs to be replaced, or that the siding needs to be updated, or that, the landscaping needs to be updated, I'm not going to retrade the deal or drop the deal because it's worse than what I thought. I'm saying that I want to buy this deal. I understand this deal. I'm willing to put non-refundable earnest money down on it as it appears. Now, again, if there's a problem with the boundaries, there's a problem with, do they actually own it? Or, is there an easement issue? Somebody's got an easement through the middle of it and it wasn't recorded correctly or something along those lines, or there's ground contamination, then it doesn't matter if it's the most pristine property in the world, we won't be able to close on that deal. So that's why we make that non-refundable earnest money always contingent on those 3. And then the 4th one is seller default. I throw that in there in the LOI stage because, if I don't put that in there and then the seller just says, well, I don't want to sell the deal to you, but you didn't put that as a contingency of non-refundable earnest money, then you could possibly lose that money. I doubt very many title companies are going to, or escrow agents are going to agree with that logic from the default seller, but it's always good to CYA. Anyway, so that's your earnest money paragraph. And then there's also a second deposit here. So usually we'll break that up 50-50. So if it was, you put 1% down right here, and then how much of that 1% is going to be non-refundable, and then another 1% here. But you can get creative with that. And then that all goes into the purchase and sale agreement once we're done. And then you have the inspection period. So that starts usually once the PSA is fully executed, and then you have wired the money. I mean, the due diligence starts whether you've wired the money or not necessarily, but it's upon fully executed purchase and sale agreement, the inspection period begins, otherwise known as due diligence. The agreement shall provide the purchaser right here. You could say provide the purchaser 30 days from the date seller receives internal corporate authority. And so that's just saying, basically we have 30 days to check out the property. So we can do our phase 1 title survey, a property condition assessment, and all of our unit walks and everything will be done during the inspection period. So you're going to use that section in the LOI to predetermine how long that's going to be. So these are the broad terms, the broad scope of which we're going to base our purchase and sale agreement. And you have all this, you have variance in stated financials. So if they provided something and you find a discrepancy and the discrepancy is greater than a certain amount, and you can spell that out here in the LOI and in the purchase and sale agreement. If it's greater than that amount, then it's misrepresentation. You also have the closing date. So on or before 30 days after satisfaction of the inspection contingency set forth in paragraph 3, which we already talked about. And then this is one thing that we always put in our purchase sale agreement, but it's agreed upon in the LOI, is 1 extension, which will not exceed 30 days, may be purchased out. It's not actually purchased, but I'll explain that in a minute. Purchased from the seller for $50,000 dollars in this case to be added to the earnest money deposit to include all exceptions therein and applied towards closing purchase price. So we call it a purchase, but it's just additional earnest money. We're going to put more non-refundable money towards the purchase price to get another 30-day extension. So we always do that. I'm going to stop share just for a second. We always do the extension on every deal, if at all possible, so that it allows us some wiggle room, which you don't want. You would love it if every deal that you did was with very understanding, reasonable, and compassionate people. But it's not always the case. Most of we've been fortunate. Some people we work with are better than others to work with. Some we don't want to work with again. But what you don't want to do is have be legally bound to something, run out of time, and everything drops, and you don't have any entitlement. And otherwise, you're in default of the purchase and sale agreement timeline, and you lose your earnest money deposit because you're a day short. So you want to leave that in there. And the reason we do it as an extension instead of just asking for like 60 days after due diligence is because most people won't agree to that, but they will agree, and they do understand that this is for logistical purposes. This is not so we can raise money, so we have more time to raise money. This is for if the surveyor was delayed in getting out there, or we couldn't get the appraiser out there, or it's taken 45 days to get an appraisal back, or the phase one didn't get back in time, and we're pushing and you're down to the wire. Let's go ahead and use our extension. We'll wire you another $50,000 and we can go ahead and give ourselves some breathing room. Doesn't mean you have to go the full 30 days, but it gives you some time. And I definitely recommend you do that because you're at the mercy of the lender. And what you don't want is you get down to like the 30th day of your contract and the lender says, oh, we can't close the day. And you get past that date and the person's like, oh, sorry. So just don't put yourself in that situation. So that's one thing that we do. I want to go ahead and pull up a PSA, and I had to redact this. I'm going to make a little bit of a disclaimer here before I share it. I'm going to go through it pretty quick because I don't want to, you get in the weeds. I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be or play one on television. So I'm just going to talk about kind of what you need to be on the lookout for, but give you a rough overview of what this is going to look like. So this is actually a deal we're working on right now. And so I've redacted most of it. But you have, your basic terms, which we just went over, your seller, purchaser, purchase price, earnest money deposit, and title company. We use Chicago Title. It's just easier because we use the same ones. That's okay there. That's what I'm trying to make sure I don't give away anybody's information, but if you see anybody, it's not intended for you. So do not distribute any information not intended for you on this webinar. So basically this is going to spell out in more detail what we talked about in the LOI. So here's your earnest money deposit. It's going to go into detail about when it goes hard and all the rest of it. All the different inspections, how, permission to get on the property, insurance coverages for people going on the property, all sorts of different things. I did see I missed a few things there. So I'm going to just scroll really quick. I want to give you an idea of how big this is. I pulled out several pages, signature pages. I didn't have time to redact them. But you have exhibits. You're going to have all these different schedules, Schedule F, Schedule A, Schedule C, all these different schedules that are going to be referenced within the purchase and sale agreement. Rid of that, and I'm going to stop share. So I know that was just really brief. I just want to go through that and just scroll down through and see how detailed that is. You need to have a very, very good attorney working on this. And when I say good attorney, I mean one that specializes in real estate contract law. We've been working on some car wash deals, and we're dealing with attorneys that don't deal in real estate contract law, but they think that they are legal professionals in every aspect of the law. including labor law and everything else. And they're the smartest thing since sliced bread, and they just jam up the process because, quite frankly, they're idiots. But it's just the way it is, and that's what you deal with sometimes in transactions. But our team is phenomenal. So we use Brownlee, Whitlow, and Prate for our counsel. They do all of our contracts. They've been on our webinars. They will be speaking at our event, I believe. They should be there either way. Norm Prate and Lenore work on our stuff most of the time, but they're phenomenal. They're very responsive. The other thing is you want to make sure you have an attorney that's going to be responsive to you, because these are very time sensitive documents that you want to get back. You're letting the seller know how professional you are right at the early stages of this transaction. And so the better you are at being responsive and getting this PSA, purchase and sale agreement, negotiated, the better it's going to leave. The better, I'm trying to, my mind just kind of went blank there. Better taste is going to leave in the seller's mouth. So you want to have a good team on this, and there's a lot to go through. So make sure you have a good legal team. But some of the things I was talking about in that purchase and sale agreement are the schedules. So you're going to have inventory of personal property. So like everything in the maintenance shed, everything in the office, computers, paper, ink, pens, pencils, curtains, popcorn machine, all that stuff is going to be listed out. Contract, assumable and non-assumable contracts. So any contract that's on the property. So landscaping, maybe you got a printer contract, maybe you have a contract with, who knows who you have contract. Maybe you have a maintenance contract with the pool. All that needs to be listed out on the purchase and sale agreement. You're going to have agreed upon schedule of what you're going to require for due diligence. So lease agreements, all those contracts, everything you're going to require. We usually put that in Schedule F. So you're going to have that whole list of everything that you're going to require. All that's going to be in there, and so you're going to want to have all that kind of set up, ready to go into the purchase and sale agreement. But there's a lot that goes into it. So having the proper team is very, very important. Some items that I have come across that are of importance, that as you deal with purchase and sale agreements, you run into problems. What was the one that I just came up with or just thought about yesterday? This is an interesting one. And these are one-off scenarios. So maybe you're going to run into this, maybe not. So we're buying a newer property. They're waiting on CO, a certificate of occupancy. So the contract was contingent on the CO. What I mean by that is the CO has to be in the hands of the seller before we will close on the deal. Idea being, it was under construction when we started negotiating this deal, when we said, okay, we're going to buy it, but you have to be done with it before we're actually going to close on it, because the bank won't lend money on something that doesn't have a CO in our case. So we said the latter of 30 days or certificate of occupancy by the seller. Okay, so that's a saying is whatever comes last, the 30 days. So if you get the CO before the 30 days, then it's 30 days after due diligence. If you get the CO after the 30 days, it's whenever you get the CO, and then you're going to put an outside date of, okay, it doesn't want to just be forever waiting on a CO that may never come. So you usually put an outside date on that. But what you want to be careful of is just don't say just upon receipt of CO. Let's say they get CO today and they say, okay, we want to close today. We got the CO. That's what the contract says. So you want to say the latter of 30 days or 10 days after receipt of the CO, or whatever time frame you feel comfortable with. Once you have a chance to, because the county is going to come and inspect, they're going to sign off saying you get the CO, but then it's going to take time to issue the CO. You want to take, you're going to have to get it. Plus you're going to have like a punch list, because CO doesn't mean they're done. It just means the county says they can move in, or the municipality said they can move in. You're going to still want to have a punch list and have time to look over what still needs to be done. So that's one thing I've come across. Making sure that you've spelled out in detail your due diligence required documents. That Schedule F, what I refer to as Schedule F, is going to be different in every contract, but spelling out what documents you're gonna want, and are you gonna walk every unit, all those different types of things you're gonna want to spell out. Assumable contracts are very, very important. If you have a contract and you say you're going to assume it, and then you get in there like, oh, I didn't realize I was going to have to pay this much money, or maybe it's a must assume contract. There is no option because they are not going to. You can't just say, let's say they have a cable contract and it's a revenue share, and if they break, they have it, they signed it, you didn't sign it, you're buying the property, but that says if they break that contract, then they have to pay $500,000 in liquidated damages. And they send you the list of contracts and you say, oh, I don't want to assume that contract. Well, they're not going to be like, okay, and we'll just pay the $500,000 and you don't have to assume it. That's a must assume contract, obviously. Now, sometimes we get those must assume contracts. We are aware of the liquidated damages or the fee to break the contract, and we plan to pay that because we don't want the contract. But that's not going to be the seller's responsibility. That's going to be our responsibility as the buyer. Let's see, variance unstated, financials, that limit of how much variance you want to allow for, out of pocket expenses. Let's say there's a default, on the seller, or something doesn't go through, maybe the deal falls through on one of the contingencies. You have time, you have paid for inspections, property condition assessment, all phase one, title survey, legal. So if the seller decides to walk away or something is misrepresented, and that's why you have to walk away, that's spelled out. And so you need to be covered in your out-of-pocket expenses. And then what's your sensitivity to that? So that's always a negotiating point. It's a $75,000 out of pocket, it's a $25,000 out of pocket. How long is the survivability of that after the contract, where you find discrepancies? How long do you have to make that claim? Those are all very, very important items. Another issue is rent ready credit. So let's, if you purchase a property and you get in, let's say there's 100 units, and you negotiated in the purchase and sale agreement that you want a $500 credit for every non-rent ready unit that is in the inventory when you close. So you'll do a walk of available units, and you'll determine how many are not rent ready, and then they'll credit that at closing based on how many are not rent ready. Because if you can't day one turn around and rent those units, you've got to spend money on that. So you're saying, okay, you're gonna have to credit me for those. That's something to be negotiated, but there's an endless number of things to be negotiated in that. Some companies get bent out of shape, and they get hung up on little things. It's a lot of business decision, but it's also a lot of legal decision. So we lean heavily on legal, but we also, they lean heavily on us because it's ultimately our decision, not theirs. They are counseling us to go a certain direction, but ultimately the decision is yours or ours in the purchase and sale agreement. I do want to go through touch on a few of the bullet points, because I know we did put those up there. They don't necessarily pertain to the PSA, but rather to due diligence. I think the notes might have gotten messed up. And I apologize about that. But let me pull up my Q&A and my chat as well. Be sure to post any questions that you have in the chat or the Q&A while I'm going over this last little section here, and then we will take questions. All right. So on here, we talked about the property condition assessment. This is has to do with due diligence once you have the purchase and sale agreement signed. So property condition assessment is usually done by your lender. It's not something you get done independently. So they will just come out and inspect everything: the parking lots, the roofs, the rooms. They're going to want to look at a certain percentage of rent ready rooms and a certain percentage of vacant rooms, and they're going to put together a whole report of a grading of how it stands as far as the condition of the property. Real property due diligence, phase one, title survey. We already went over that a lot. So phase one, just to be clear, is environmental ground testing. Title is ownership, rights to the property. So title insurance, former title policies, that's what that pertains to. Any encroachments, any easements, that's where you want to talk on title. And then survey, boundaries, making sure the property is represented correctly. Those are the three main ones. And then on the bullet points, should you walk every unit and check every lease? That is a definite yes on that. Once you get the PSA signed, you want to make sure you do that on every single one. And what does retraining a deal mean, and should you do it? And again, this pertains more to due diligence, but retraining a deal, that's something that we don't try to do very, very often. Just puts a bad taste in people's mouth, especially brokers and sellers. So have enough room in your underwriting to overcome, discrepancies. You should have toured the property. You should know basically what you need to do to the property when you get there in rough numbers. And if you're so tight on your CapEx that you can't overcome something that was found, minor, then your underwriting is not conservative enough, or you didn't allow for enough CapEx to incorporate that. But just make sure you're not retrading deals, unless if there's an underground sewer line break and there's a sinkhole that opens up on the property. Okay, that's we're going to retrade the deal. Or if COVID hits and the rates go up a point, like it did in 20, then yeah, you're gonna have to retrade the deal. Right now, there's a big issue. A lot of people are dropping out of deals because they underwrote prior interest rates, and now the deal is coming ready to close. So, interest rates have gone up significantly in the past and this quarter, and not that many people expected to go quite that fast. So if you didn't and you got to the end here, and you might have to retrade the deal, or the deal's not going to work. We tried to keep a pretty good finger on that, and we have allowed for that. It didn't win us a lot of deals because of that, but a lot of the people that did get awarded the deals during that time frame lost the deal or fell out of the deal because they didn't underwrite it correctly. So I'd rather not win the deal than win the deal and then have to drop out of the deal, because that ruins your reputation. So you always got to be up on capital markets and know what's going on with the rates. So, all right, I'll take a breath there. That was very quick. I am going to have to jump off a little bit early today. I'm working on a bunch of deals here. So I want to go down through and see if there's any questions, and see what we can discuss. And I don't have any questions, so I'm going to give it just a second before we say goodbye. And I do want to go ahead, while we're waiting on questions, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my screen share and talk about next week. That we're going to be talking about learn the best way to handle prospective investor calls, how to build out a funnel to properly respond to your prospective investors. Discussion around technology you can use to automate some of your tasks. When it comes to scheduling calls, what is the one question that every prospective investor is thinking that they will never ask you? What are the most common questions prospective investors will ask during a call? And so much more. So be sure to check that out. That's called Best Call Script for Talking to Prospective Investors for our partner Syndication with our very own Andrew Davis. So be sure to check that out next week. Let me go back over here to our questions. All right. So the price from due diligence is way off. When would we retrade? If you could, Kevin, just clarify what you mean by if the price from due diligence is way off. I'm assuming once you got into due diligence, you're saying the price that you could pay for it ended up not being the price that you could buy it for. If you want to just clarify it in the chat, and I'll get back to that one. How often do you request an Alta survey? So we request an Alta on every deal. It doesn't matter if they just had one done. So if they did just have one done, and on a lot of our new deals, they have recent Altas, but they don't have as-built. So they'll have a proposed Alta, and then they'll have, we'll have to get the as-built. So usually we'll have to get that during our due diligence, but let's say it's a already built, stabilized property, and they have one that was done last year. We're going to get that. We're going to contact that surveyor, have it updated, and then put it in. That's just, checking the box, make sure everything's good. We do that on every single one. All right. So when would you retrade? What is the criteria? Retrade means renegotiating price, correct? We don't retrade, to be clear. Like this, we've never done that. It's a bad practice. Don't do it. So I will back up. There was one deal that we had to renegotiate a price, and that was during COVID. That was in 2020 when interest rates jumped 1 point over the weekend. We just didn't have that kind of sensitivity built in, and it was unprecedented times. We had a conversation with the seller and said, "Look, it is what it is. Nobody else can buy your deal anyways, besides us. Right now with private equity groups dropping out." And so we were able to do that. But as far as like putting a deal under contract, and then like not doing enough due diligence ahead of time. So you have due diligence that you do before you offer on a deal, and then you have due diligence after you offer on a deal. Let me explain those quickly. Due diligence before you offer on the deal is your real due diligence. The due diligence after you get the deal under contract is verifying that your original due diligence was correct. Okay, so you don't want to get in the fact of just slapping offers on deals that you haven't really looked at and you haven't paid attention to, just to try to get spaghetti to stick to the wall. And then you get awarded a deal, and then you go and you're like, "Oh, whoops, I didn't realize I was going to have to replace the roof, and the windows need replaced, and I didn't account for that, so I can't buy it for this. I'll give you this much." Just candidly, you're going to look really bad to everybody involved in that transaction, and they'll never do business with you again. So don't ever do that. What I'm talking about, the only time you should retrade is if there was misrepresentation. Let's say, maybe they said during your due diligence they gave you financials, right? And they had a corporate contract for leases. And then you get into due diligence and you're doing the lease audit and you find out that that's not real. So their occupancy was off. And so what they represented was different than what was real. Okay, that's something that can and should be retraded on. Okay, because that affects your NOI. That was not real income. So if there's some problem or discrepancy that is the seller's fault, okay, that is fine to have that discussion within a certain range. That's why what I talked about, the range of discrepancy in actuals versus represented financials. You want to make sure you lock that down in the purchase and sale agreement. So you have a footing. If you don't do that and you don't put a dollar figure on, it's going to be harder to do. So say, it's 10,000, 15,000, 50,000. I don't know what your sensitivity is, but you're going to put that in there. And that's really the only thing that I would retrade on. Like right now, let's say you put a deal, you were awarded a deal and you put an offer on it, last month, and now rates have gone up a little bit. And now you're like, "Hey guys, the rates have gone up, and I can't pay what I thought." And the broker would say, "Well, yeah, everybody knew the rates are going up. I thought you accounted for that." And the other groups may have accounted for that, and now they have egg on their face because they got to go back to the seller and say, "Well, the group we chose for you as your brokers to buy this deal didn't underwrite debt correctly," and so they're going to fall out of the deal. And now we got to go through this process again, and everybody's upset, and they blame it all on you. So just a clear and candid what I say about retrading, because there are groups that do that intentionally. That is their MO. They will come in high with every intention of retrading, and you can do that one time and you get figured out. And I will never sell somebody that does that another deal. We've had them do it to us, and it's a one and done. So if that's the way you want to do it, that's fine. I don't recommend it. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm trying to be as candid as possible. I don't think you should ever retrade a deal unless it's like a force majeure issue. Okay. So physical inspection prior to your offer is in order. Yes, you should always tour the property. If it's off market and you can't tour, I'll drive by. I don't really care. Just be candid. If there's any brokers on the call, I do this. So if you say no tours, I'm driving the property. I don't care what they say. It's public property. I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to go inside. I'm not going to ask questions. I might send someone to secret shop, try to act like they want to rent an apartment. I am going to put eyes on it. I'm also going to do Google Street View. I'm going to check demographics. I'm going to check population. I'm going to check, comps. So I know the area without going there, but I'm also going to put, eyes on it. I can do a lot with Google Street, but you want to drive the property, get a feel for the resident base, the type of cars that are in the property. What does the roof look like? Is the paint faded? Are the windows fogged up? Is the landscaping kept up? What's the vintage of the property? That right off the bat. If it's mid 80s, I'm going to have to check for certain things. If it's 70s, I'm going to have to check for certain things. So, you're talking about polybutylene pipes and aluminum wiring and, cast iron sewer drains and all those things that you run into with the older vintage. You should know those if you're buying that vintage. And so that shouldn't even be a question. So, you can put contingencies. So on older properties, I'm not going to put non-refundable earnest money as much as I am on newer properties, because the newer properties, I have warranties from the contractor and it's brand new. So I'm not gonna have to worry about roots growing into a cast iron or a clay sewer line in a 2022 new construction building. So I don't have to worry about that as much. But yes, you should put eyes on it. A lot of times with an off-market deal, we will say in the LOI, hey, yeah, we're good with this LOI, this letter of intent, which is a non-binding legal document. It's not a legal document, but it's contingent on us doing an official tour. And so we want to go talk to the leasing agent. We want to talk to the on-site manager. We want to walk it with a broker. We want to look at a model unit. So we're telling you, we're going to give you this. We're going to give you an LOI, but we're telling you in the LOI that we want to tour the property before we get into PSA negotiations, just so everybody's on the same page. I guard our reputation with the utmost, it's very, very important. So be sure to do that. What law firm do you use? Can we get a copy of your PSA? PSA is not something that you can really do a copy of because it's going to be specific to the deal, your attorney. So it wouldn't do you any good for me to give you a copy of the PSA. Plus, I don't have one that's just redacted like a general form. It's all has specific deal information in it. We use Brownlee, Whitlow, and Prate, spelled P-R-A-T-E. So they are out of Raleigh and Atlanta. They opened an office in Atlanta as well. And I think Charlotte too. I think they just opened an office there. So they are a phenomenal firm. So I definitely recommend it. That's what we use for real estate. We use a different SEC attorney, but that's a different conversation. What if due diligence shows issues you didn't know about that diminish the value of the property, or the title commitment shows costly exceptions, SSL for a reduction in purchase price or credit at closing? Is this still considered retraining? I mean, it is considered retraining. If there's a problem with title, then that's a major problem. Okay, so you've already dealt with that because you already put that in the, like what we talked about, like I had that non-refundable earnest money contingent on title phase 1 of the survey. If you have a problem with title that's going to take a lot to cure, then we usually put exceptions for them to cure any issues with the title as part of that in the PSA. So that if you find anything, great, fix it, and we're good. So there's no retrade at that point. It's just like, well, that's what the contract says. So you can guard against that, but that's where it helps to have a very good attorney to help you navigate some of that tricky water. So all right, that's all the questions that we have, and that's all the time that we have. So be sure to tune in next week for Andrew's webinar talking about the best call script for talking to prospective investors for apartment syndication. If I don't talk to you before then, we'll see you in Charlotte for our in-person event in June. But everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you later.